From the Vice President from the Society for Technical Communication, Philadelphia Metro Chapter, and we'd like to welcome you to our spring webinar, which is Millennial Documentation, Analyzing the Intersection of Content and Gratification. Our presenter tonight is Pooja Vijay Kumar. As a student of design strategy and an advocate of content experience, Pooja serves the academic community at California College of the Arts in San Francisco. And previously, Pooja spent a great part of her career at Oracle, where she championed the content strategy for enterprise applications. She's delivered sessions at Write the Docs meetups in the Bay Area and has spoken on minimalism and conversational UIs at the Big Design Conference in Texas. STC India chapter regional conferences, and has conducted workshops and learning sessions for young women on pursuing offbeat content design careers through initiatives led by ITU at the United Nations. In the past, Pooja served as the editor-in-chief at a global nonprofit where she drove the content strategy of web and print experiences for communication leaders, and was recognized for bringing in about 80% boost to ROI through content. And she has a deep interest in understanding audience engagement. And when she's not writing or speaking at an event, she can be found running a marathon, which is a lot longer than I can run, baking a tray of cupcakes, or photographing street food. So Pooja, we are very excited to have you, and welcome to our Philadelphia chapter webinar this year.
Thank you so much, Danielle. It is my pleasure. Finally, I get a chance to communicate with the STC-PMC community. It's been a long time since Danielle and I have been collaborating on initiatives, some kind of initiative, and I'm glad that this webinar was possible. So thank you. And I just want to check, is my audio fine? Is everyone able to hear me right?
I can hear you.
Perfect. I'm
okay?
going. All right.
Yep, we're good. We got at least one person in the chat.
Okay, so I was actually looking at the attendee list and wondering whether we want to keep everyone's audio open as well. I am more than happy to take questions as I speak. And I'm happy to make this a more of an intimate affair so that, I think we might all have some insights about what I'm going to speak, I'm guessing. Let me launch my presentation. And is this appearing correctly, or is it cutting off or any?
Good. Looks good.
Okay, thank you. So let's get started. So hello everyone, good evening. Thank you so much for making the time to be at this webinar here today. I imagine the weather is still playing a big spoilsport there, but it's been a rainy day here in San Francisco. And it's interesting because I get this opportunity to do this webinar from the comforts of my home. So thank you again for that. So let me introduce you to the futuristic millennial. Well, if you're still wondering, that's me with all that gray hair, or let me say lustrous silver hair. This was, well, it's not my real hair. Yeah, this was as part of a theatrical act that I had done at my school, the California College of the Arts, where we were working on this project of the future of emotions. And even in today's talk, I have tried to include some of those insights that we looked at, especially in terms of content strategy. So I'm Pooja. I am currently serving as the content strategy and communications manager for the design division at CCA. And I am also doing my MBA in design strategy here. So it's exciting because I'm coming back to school after 7 years of my experience in the documentation and content space. So I'm hoping to share, I do have a ton of information, but I'm hoping to funnel it down and only present relevant stuff to you guys in our very tight timeline for today. And I'm also serving as the local leader for Interaction Design Foundation, which is a nonprofit design organization with chapters across 200 countries, I guess. And it's fun because I get to not just be on design, but also see how content is a huge part of the curriculum they design and deliver to students across the globe. So these are the two roles that I'm primarily juggling right now. But few other organizations that I have been closely associated with in the past I would say 3 or 4 years now. I was prior to my move here to the US, I was with Oracle. I was working with the Enterprise Business Applications team, and there we delivered a ton of documentation suite for CRM and projects products. So, of course, we didn't really have the luxury of knowing who our users are then. Because of the real breadth of customers that Oracle has. And along with my full-time day job, I was also serving as the editor for this nonprofit called Toastmasters International. I wish I could ask how many of them have heard about this organization, but I'm not monitoring my chat window here. But feel free to drop your reactions on that window, and I think Daniel and I will visit that in between my presentation. So during that time, I also had this chance to give several engagements, get into several engaging talks with students as part of International Telecommunications Union. It's an United Nations organization. So it's been a ton of action, and what I realized over the years is that the only thing that brings me closer to my calling is content, and be it technical, creative, fictional, non-fictional, any sort of content, I feel really excited. So I invite you into my discussion for tonight, and hopefully we might have a more rich conversation, because I'm guessing most of you are walking into this discussion with more than a decade of experience. So I'm happy to invite your thoughts. So on July 2016, I received a congratulatory message saying that, Pooja, you've been made the chief editor of District 98 of Toastmasters International. Now, I was jubilant when I received that email from my director of this organization. District 98 is basically spread across Asia, from with cities like from India, from Singapore, from China, from Sri Lanka, and it was a very empowering role. I was super excited. What I really understood was that it meant not only was I the chief editor, but I was the story catcher, the deadline chaser, the 1 a.m. email writer, and the life stalker for over 4,000 members across these regions. And like how normal human beings would react, I was in this very panicky mode and freaking out because I just didn't know how could I control the scope of work that I would need to do. And mind you, it was a nonprofit volunteering role. And along with that, I also had a full-time job. So then I decided that I should not be suffering alone. I need to have an army with me who will help me do this task. And with that ambition, I launched my Gmail and began typing furiously. I think that might have been late in the night, a long email asking people to connect. Now, like you can see here, this was the first thing that I did as soon as I assumed the position, just reaching out to everyone I could. Now, the good thing about this reach plan was that I had the names of all the point of contacts in all these different regions. And I think the list was as long as 60 or 70 people who were part of this email chain. And I began with just saying that, what do I want in my army? I addressed them with movers and shakers, and it's just a casual email. There was no way for me to determine whether this email is just going to land in the spam box or it's just going to be, completely ignored by people. There was no way for me to determine that, and therefore I made sure that I had everything that I could do in this one email body. And that set the tone for the rest of the lifetime that I spent in that position. So these are the few A's that I captured, right? From arming my people, my audience, with what they could do, admitting my capabilities and my abilities of how long have I been part of the organization, what can I do for the community, what can I help people who will be influenced by my work dream about in terms of tangible actions, or the ROI, as we normally say it in the corporate world. And what is my ambition? What do I aim to do with this stint? And what do I aim to do with this collaboration? So then I planned my action plan, and I decided that we wanted a team, we wanted a particular talent, we wanted people with a certain set of skills, and we wanted people to be enthusiastic about how they are going about their roles. Because at the end of the day, no matter how talented you are in a particular skill, if you do not have the willingness to contribute your time and energy, it's all going to fall flat. So with all that in mind, I made sure that I had my list of action and I hit send. The next thing I know is that I am interviewing 50 people for this set of, I think we were 8 people then, and then we expanded our team to 10 in order to take care of this ambitious initiative of reaching people in different parts of our country while I was in India, as well as other regions in Asia. So then what did we do? We ran a series of litmus tests. The idea of us having a team was just for us to have all the resources in order to reach the people and get the stories. So my role as the editor was just to have the content, not just building, but also have the newsletters going out timely in a regular fashion, as well as one that provides value for the community. And that's when we ran these set of litmus tests, which were nothing but surveys. And these surveys, I have some snapshots here. It was just as good as, have you read the newsletter? The newsletter was called Communicate 98. So we had one other newsletter issue going out every month prior to me taking on the role. So it became essential for us to analyze what was happening with the content that was already been produced in the past. How were people reacting to all these stories that had been captured? And do any of these people go back to them and revisit them? So we asked questions like, have you read the newsletter? How many articles do you read? Have you ever submitted an article? What sections would you like to read? How much time do you spend? Do you read the entire article? And what do you think will help you be more excited about our issues? So this was just a primary way for us to gauge what exactly is our reader, what exactly is our this entire bunch of readers that we have in different regions interested in. And on the basis of this quantitative research that we did, we realized that we were looking at 2 important things here. One was content, in terms of whether it's a newsletter, or whether it is a blog, or whether it's just a reshare happening from one of the social media handles. And what are the experiences that these readers are having in mind while they are putting in their thoughts on that research survey? So then we looked at what's the action? what is the action we can build for these readers in order to help them stay in the community. And Toastmasters is a public speaking organization, so for them, having member retention and also being able to help the members advance in their leadership and communication track was extremely essential. So with that objective in mind, what is the action plan that we can build in our content? That was one of the things we identified. Second thing, how can we enhance the understanding of the stories, of the personal episodes that people are sharing through these articles? Also, what is the utility? We're often in our documentation suites, for that matter, in technical writing, we focus on the feature. We work our way backwards in order to decrypt that complex technical piece of information into a simple language. And that just goes about how do we look at utility decryption in our content. So that was the third aspect we identified. The fourth aspect was entertainment, and that was high on this platform because it was a nonprofit. There is no need for readers to actually be reading that content. It's optional. It's a huge investment on their time. It's a huge investment on their energy and their attention span. So how can we keep our users entertained and at the same time provide value to them? That was the other key highlight we identified. And how is this whole content experience making things profitable for not just the readers, but as well as the developers of content or the hosters of content in this particular context? So we analyzed at all these cases which were apparent through the survey. But the other thing that we figured out was this latent need, or rather, there is no need for this particular experience. It's called the just-in-case content that we produce. And this is nothing but having content for the sake of it. I think if we look back at our applications and if we look back at the clunky sets of documentation that we have in our organizations, I'm pretty sure that there would be at least 40% of content that is existing in today's date and time that could be classified as just-in-case content. Because often teams do not have the bandwidth to update these kind of documentation sets. They do not have it's just not in the scope of looking at items. And that's how content which was at one time useful and meaningful is rendered just in case with the advancement of the application lifecycle. So we looked at content, we looked at these experiences, and then we said, so there must be some sweet spot where users are saying that this is how I feel when I interact with this application, or when I interact with this piece of this mouthpiece, which was our newsletter in our case. So we wanted to see what can we do to expand this overlapping zone. How can we make our content more relevant, more meaningful, more useful, more valuable for our readers, and have that engagement going there? So what could be the third factor? Is it just about content and experience? We were looking at not just content sets when we did that survey, but we were looking at overall engagement that was happening on the platform, which was actually a result of the impact of our deliverable. So the third thing that we imagined was, could it be relevance? Along with content and experience, context also matters, and that plays a huge part in determining how impactful is the content that we are producing. So we looked at these three layers, and we looked at how do they meld with each other, especially when we are creating that first draft of copy. Could it be just the relevance aspect that we identified, or is there something more that we are missing? And this is where we decided that Emotions are definitely the biggest aspect when it comes to looking at experiences. In design, the word empathy has been used and overused to such a great extent that we no longer know the importance of how people emote when they look at a piece of content or when they read that first word on the interface. It could be in terms of the error messages or even the help content that we are generating. So Plutchik's wheel of emotions, like you can see, is a way for us to describe the relation of emotions. And we use that as a starting point to understand that what can we do in order to hit all these zones, which we think are relevant emotions in our experience, as well as discard the ones that are not essential to our deliverable. Feeling good is not the same as instant gratification. And this is what we learned when we actually put out our first copy of the newsletter out. People were reacting. They were not able to figure out what their needs are. They were confused. They had no idea where was the content going in the past. What are we trying to say with our new vision? Especially because there is a new team in place, there is a new structure coming in place. So the initial reactions are often that of confusion. So the initial reactions are often that of confusion and loss of not being able to keep track of how things are going. And that's how we realized that, well, in order for us to have our users be in the zone of giving that sweet spot or having that area of pleasure through the content, it would be important for us to really get down there and break down the model to see what can we do in the content even more. This is when we realized that our audience was actually, what was our research leading to? It was just this idea of how can we look at these 4,000 people and break them down into reader segments versus customer segments. So one of the ways for us to do that was, of course, the surveys. The second thing for us to do was that to let them know that we have a channel of communication. We made sure that we had all our contacts going in, be it through the survey on every page or be it through the POCs that we identified who were part of my team as people who could be contacted for any sort of information or follow-ups. And one big thing that we discovered from those engagements then was that this was a growing population of members in the community who were in the age group of 19 to somewhere 35-ish, who were really interested in improving their communication skills through the platform. And the other thing that we discovered that came as a outcome of having that kind of demography was the idea of how are these people looking at content? Are they even open to the idea of reading texts that were flowing into pages that were not limited to one? If we had a featured article, how are people looking at leadership posts? How are people looking at articles which had goal posts, like some educational takeaway? And that's when we realized that we were working with a generation that was thriving on the swipe right ecosystem. So they look at the titles, they decide they want to stay on the page or they move on, So that helped us understand that what do we need to do? It's not the idea of having clickbait titles, but it's the idea of helping people know in that cursory first glance, what is it that the content is trying to say to them? And that was one of the primary ideas that we made sure we retained and we incorporated it as we went building our content sets, from newsletters to even the website now. So how did we work with this entire idea of having these sentiments captured? So we looked at that the same intersection that we that we were talking about, the content experience and relevance, we broke that down into several layers, and we gave each layer one name. Now, what that layer did was that it set the context. And that's how we go here and we identify those themes. And those themes actually came from what are the needs for our readers? Or like we might ask in our own product documentation, what are the needs of my users when he's looking at this feature update? Or when he's trying to learn about a new procedure? Or if he's trying to install a new system? How can we get to know as writers what are the needs of our users? One of the ways for us to do that is to actually track the bugs. And for us, it was challenging in a way at Oracle, because the support team was very distant from the documentation team, and we had to have several communication channels for us to just be able to get that log from them and figure out that how is that making a difference in our documentation suite. But not all companies might have the same challenge. If you're working in a startup, or if you're working in like a platform like this, where you know who your readers are or you know who your users are, that's when it gets easier for us to just have that touch point with them and see what they need. And often we will realize that these needs are coming in terms of nouns. Like, I need a good documentation suite, whatever the good means. Or I need a system which will help me do a credit transaction or something of that sort. But it's never really capturing the real idea of what the user needs. And that's when we figured out that needs are verbs and not nouns. So if you ever get a response in terms of a noun, a system, a application, I think you should do your research, take your research even one step more in order to see what are those driving factors for users to be on that page, for users to be interacting in that one segment of the navigation flow. What is determining their journey, right? So with that idea in mind, we went ahead and developed the ACT, which is the annual calendar of themes. And like you can see on this page, these were the 11 themes that we worked on, beginning with celebrate, unite, illuminate, evolve, reflect, surprise, dream, engage, and love. And what we did next was to assign each of these themes along a timeline. So for every month, we would have one governing theme for that particular issue or for that particular posts that were coming up on our website then. So is this what glues our content, right? Is this how we can create the anticipation for our content? Or could this be the way for us to disrupt the existing ways in which we are building all these chaotic jumbles of mismanaged information, taking it down, bringing it down in a funnel, and then pushing it out to the customers? So the idea of cohesion, I felt that this was one image which helped me just understand that cohesion could be such a loose idea if we do not know what are the elements that are responsible in making a project successful, be it a content project for that matter, or be it even a software project or even a leadership project like this. So 4 ideas: anticipation, disruption, revolution, and imagination. These were the 4 pillars for us to make that change. So how can we do that? How else can we do that is a question that I think we might want to answer. So like you can see, these were the 11 issues we came up with. We had each issue working with a different set of typography inside the issue. We had themes from celebrate to themes of love, like you can see here, which was dedicated to the month of Feb. And we actually pulled in pictures from readers across these regions, which was another tedious task. But I think by then, by the month of Feb 2017, we had already made an impact in the reader community, and the word was out already. So it was not really as challenging for us to get all those images in place for us to build that collage. But the other idea here is that we really try to experiment. And it is this style of iteration that we were open to that really helped us get our content there and play around and see what exactly is our reader base reacting to, right? So each of these themes, despite they being assigned each month, we had a 3-month quarterly cycle to evaluate how were readers finding our content. Again, we had surveys in place. Sometimes we even did in-person interviews. We also tried to get in touch with the presidents of clubs, because each of these clubs had different presidents and different contact leaders who further helped us get down to that one end user, right, who often is obscured in the whole process. So these were some of the issues that we finally designed and put together. But we came back to that model. We came back to our Plutchik's wheel of emotions, and we looked at what are those 8 categories that we can use in order to capture or give a direction for our content. So we broke it down into 8 sections, like you can see here. Is it anticipation? Is it joy? A feeling of trust? Or is it taking away the fear from the minds of the readers? Is there any element of surprise we can inject? Is there any sort of grief or sadness? Is there any kind of disgust that is already existing in the reader base? And of course, is there any kind of anger that is silently being borne by the community? Looking at each of these sections, it just helped us realize that there were a ton of questions that we could ask to see how people are feeling at the moment. And we did that. We realized that millennials, this is one generation of people who balance thinking and emotions at the same level. Their rational side and their emotional side, they work in tandem. And that is where we realized that no matter how large the number is, whether it's 3,000 people or 4,000 people, we need to understand that this is what drives them and this is how they think. And with that in mind, we took one step forward. We said, let's make the personas for these 4,000 customers or readers in our case. Personas, just for people who do not know, it's a description for a typical user. So your user could be a farmer, or it could be a business CEO, it could be a student, it could be anyone. But what is that one typical demography that you think will be representative is what is condensed in a persona. So I want to share one of the strategies that we applied in building these personas. Before that, though, what exactly are we trying to do with these personas? And as tech writers, I don't think we really have that opportunity to build personas. But if we could, I think there is immense value in the way we are going to capture documentation or content changes. One of the things the persona does is that it defines who the story is about, right? Who's your main character? Is it a customer who's working in an energy field, or is it a customer who's working in the retail field? Bring down that domain, capture that word. This main character is the one who will also have attitudes, motivations, goals, and pain points associated with his role. Have these lists populated. I'll get to the persona template, but looking at all these factors helps us zero down on what is that one typical user looking like who's actually reading our content at the end of the day. The second thing is to build a scenario. Define the where, when, and how of the story, and see how is your persona interacting in that story. What is the narrative that can help this persona behave the way he wants to behave, using the character that you had in mind while you were creating the content, right? So once you have your actor in place, once you have the premise in place, then you define the goal for this setup. What does this person want? What does he need to fulfill his goals? What are his goals? What is the motivation for him to be taking this action? And when that goal is reached, that's when the scenario ends. So basically, you develop several scenarios, imagining what is your user doing from this one user journey, right from the time he logs into the system till the time he generates that report. What are the various scenarios he's able to go through? Do we have all the information that we can imagine for us to have that content in place? Or even if this is a content that you have already been working on, you could go back to that particular document and break it down and see where is the navigation weak, and what is it that you can do in your documentation set in order to weaken, in order to strengthen that weak spot. So there are 10 steps to these personas. The first one, of course, is finding your users. Go ahead, approach your support team, get those bug numbers, track those customers, see where are your users really thriving in your application. Have your questions asked. That's the first thing you need to do, regardless of how long have you been in the system, or maybe even if you've done analysis of your users years ago, I think it's definitely time to take stock and see how have things changed or improved with time. So ask questions. Who are your users? How many users are there? What do they do with the system? And have those answers captured. That would give you your quantitative way of doing this research. Spreadsheets are immensely helpful, and I'm a big fan of spreadsheets. I definitely use them in order to have my review process in place. But even if you are working on applications that do not have robust reporting systems, build your own spreadsheet. Have those columns identified and start populating them. Second thing is to build a hypothesis. What are the differentiating factors among my users? What can help you answer that? Is it maybe a conversation with your with the engineer who's working on your application, who knows what exactly the user is clicking a particular drop down for, or any sort of action on the interface? Often the kind of questions we ask to the people, we might get different answers from different audiences. And this is something that even I have noticed in my own experience. So have your hypothesis ready, ask as many questions as you can to as many different people, and analyze that material. Group your answers together in order to identify those users, and identify what are the groups in which these users can be clustered into. That will help you get the answer to what your persona, that typical user, looks like, right? And the third thing is to verify all the data that you have collected. It could be right from the values, the likes, the dislikes, the inner needs, the areas where they're working, the conditions for working, the strategies, the goals. All of these valid data points can be qualitatively analyzed by using and by having just a meeting with your stakeholders, right? So finding your users, building a hypothesis, verifying that data with your team and with other teams who are working on the same product line, and finding the patterns. So does this initial group, whatever you have identified, is there any sort of relation that you can have with the kind of product that you are working on? Maybe let's say you're working on a shopping cart journey. Do you think these users belong to a group that is relevant to their buying needs or selling needs? If so, how else can you motivate what they need? Or how can you capture that in words in your document and help them ease the cycle, right? So finding the patterns, and then comes constructing the personas. So I'm not sure if everyone can see these little bullets here, but the same questions that we've asked in the first 5 steps. What is the Assign a name for your user. It could be any name. It need not be a name of your customer who you're working with. It could be any name. Identify the name, the age, and build the psyche for that user. What kind of a user is he or she? What kind of background do they belong to? What kind of occupations are they in? What are their emotions and attitudes? Are they as comfortable in using technology? Are they as comfortable in bringing themselves up to change? And what are the documents that you can produce in order to put this language out there, right? So this is the biggest idea of having the personas. It's just a reference material for you to know for whom are you building all this great content for. And the remaining 4 steps focus on what can you do once you know who your actor is? How can you define the situations? How can you get their buy-in? How do you know that someone likes this, right? And how can you disseminate that information? How can you maybe you could have posters, or maybe you could have meetings like how we did in our case, or maybe even emails or campaigns for that matter. So how can you have all this knowledge being disseminated is also a crucial aspect for you to consider. And when you are creating your personas, what happens once these personas start reflecting in your work or in the technology of your application or in your content? How are you breaking down all of these into situations and scenarios and use cases so that you can look at the requirements and work toward those requirements, as well as have ongoing maintenance and development to those use cases? So this is just a gist of everything that you can do in order to know your user well, and how can you have design principles being incorporated into technical writing. So I don't think there are many firms who are focusing on millennials as a user demography in documentation. And definitely, it's definitely not the word documentation, but a more attractive term like maybe content or micro copies or whatever people want to say for content that is snackable for this generation. So some of these insights from my research have just helped me understand that this idea of gratification is somewhere coming from the idea of millennials being a huge part of not just development cycle, but as well as this whole group of people who we are working to serve. So like I said, are things consumable in a way that serves their attention span? And how friction-free is it for them to use and consume all this information? And also, does it list only those most relevant pieces of information that your users or your readers want to read? These are the 3 ideas that really drive the idea of gratification, or how can we have more action in that sweet spot that we looked at in the previous slide. So personas, like we can see on this slide though, this is more goal oriented, but personas could also be role based, where it is behavior driven, or personas could be more engaging in terms of understanding characters and stories. Or they could even be fictional, like emerging straight from your research. So cut straight to the nitty-gritty and see what your typical users do, and go ahead and build those personas. And one of the tools I use is Mural, like you can see here. It's a super easy tool. It's you can go in there, create a login ID, and you can have a bunch of canvases generated, right from mind maps to business models to even these personas, like some of these that I built. And you can even have secondary personas and primary personas. It's a super effective tool. The link is here. I'm happy to take any questions from anyone this far.
Pooja, this is Danielle. I have a question right off the bat. Is Mural a free application or is that a paid application?
I think it is free for the first 30 days, but I think after that it's a paid application. But you can create multiple login IDs if that works.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? You can either, I could unmute everybody if you're online that way, or if you want to unmute yourself, or if you'd like to just put something in the chat window, I can translate it for you.
Perfect. Has anyone else had a chance to work on documents where they do not know who the end user is? Any experiences that anyone wants to share? And have you ever tried to figure out who that user is?
Well, I can say that I am, just because at this point I'm working for a company where it's a global company, and so you've got multiple ages, multiple job responsibilities, and working for corporate communications, you're trying to figure out who everybody is. It could be somebody in a factory, it could be somebody working in an office, it could be, the CEO, it could be anybody in between. So it can be a little tricky.
Right. And that's where, at least for me, while I have been in the tech writing industry, it's extremely challenging for us to see that who our end users are. And in fact, one such time we did receive an email written directly to the primary author of that document, because they saw the name and they were like, okay, let me try this. And it just came to our inbox, and we were also excited that, okay, people feel the value in our document and they want to reach out. So I don't know how many of us really have that kind of ability to get in touch with that, that end user who's actually finding our content really useful. So
right. It's difficult, especially if you've got a very large audience. And like you said, there's the millennials, but there's the Gen X's and the baby boomers. When you've got a widespread, it can be a little difficult.
Yeah, totally.
Anybody else have any questions or comments or that they'd like to add?
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hi, Lori.
Okay, I just want to say I use personas just generally for the end user as the job function that person is doing, but not age, sometimes sex, but I've never really thought about their age.
I feel that's always the missing piece, because we really focus on their behaviors and we directly correlate that with their occupation. So in personas especially, I don't think there is even, at least in the templates that we get online and people who use them, they do not see all these other criteria that they need to keep in mind in order to just see, this could be, someone who is not really a typical user, or who doesn't belong to the kind of experience level. Like if he's a new person who's just been onboarded into the system, and he turns out to be a end user for your enterprise application, you might want to think that, okay, he is a user proficient with navigating the application, but it's only until you realize that, okay, he's just new in the system, he's, who knows, straight out of school or college or whatever. And so age is not really a criteria that people consider, but it's good to know and capture in the document as well, if you have all the data points, I would say.
Okay, does anyone else have any other questions, comments?
I'm happy to share the persona document, that the one with the 10 steps, as well as, okay, even the presentation. I'm not sure if there's a way for us to upload this anywhere, Daniel, but I'm happy to share the presentation.
Okay, sure. No, I was going to say, if you have the PowerPoint slides, you can just email them to me and I can upload them to our slide share and share that link with anybody who's on the call. And we have been recording this, so hopefully they'll be able to see some of that as well, just through the recording as well. So that should work out okay. And it looks like if anybody has any questions, they can get you through your email here that you have listed here. Okay.
Feel free to reach me on LinkedIn or email, and I'm happy to have this dialogue continued, because I know that personas itself can actually be covered in an entire presentation. So it's just scratching the surface through this discussion. But thank you for having me here and for everyone who could make it. And I look forward to any other questions anyone else might have as they work on their projects.
Okay, actually we do have one more. Anathea has asked, I'm curious about what other aspects of content reactions millennials share other than the right swipe binary thinking.
Right, and this is actually a really good question, because these are the criteria through which we usually gauge the reactions. You know, we have a ton of new interface swiping and clicking and pushing and pinching and all of that we are allowing on our interfaces. It's just one other way for us to know that how are people really reacting to the things that they are seeing on these interfaces. For me, I think the swipe right has become more like a mentality. You know, it's a decision making. It's a way for people to make decisions. These days, folks, they do not really spend a lot of time. It's like, should I not? It's as easy as that. There is no other amount of thought going into that decision. So the idea of swipe right was not really restricted to that interface action, but it was more to convey the idea of how is decision making happening in cases of millennials. So they want things fast, they want things matching up to their taste, they want everything to be suited to their preferences, and that's where, you know, all these even personas for that matter, I think that's where the idea of having that typical user in mind comes into picture. So I'm not sure if I've answered your question completely, but I think content in terms of everything that we see on the interface has now become a medium. Content is the interface more than, you know, having a real estate on the screen. So that's what I would think.
And Athea, does that answer your question?
Thank you. Yes,
put it in the chat if you'd like. Okay, cool.
All righty.
Well, everyone, we again greatly appreciate you coming tonight. What we'd like to invite you, for anyone who is in the area, in about 2 weeks, we have Conduit, which is STC-PMC's premier event. It is 2 days. You can go to 1 day or both days. We have workshops. We have 7 workshops this year, half-day workshops on Friday, April 6th. And we also have our full day conference on April 7th. I've got the webpage here so you can see where it is. If you go to stcpmc.org and you click on the conferences tab, you will get a whole bunch of different pages that will give you the overview and registration information, as well as anything about our workshops and the presentations, as well as who's sponsoring, all that good stuff. So if you are interested, we've got 2 weeks to still register. There's still some seats left, so we encourage you to do that. And again, I'd like to thank Pooja for her fantastic presentation. And if there's no other questions, I'd like to thank you once more for attending tonight. And we'll be sending this out later today, if you'd like to, or tonight, if you'd like to review it again. And we'll also post Pooja's notes on our website under past events very soon. So again, thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you for being here.